in the quiet moments before sleep. A new world of stories begins at Mythical Story Time. We venture into the depths of secrets, uncovering hidden knowledge and exploring tales that captivate the mind. If you're ready to drift into a restful sleep, join us, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories to come.
Imagine the first light of dawn spreading over the land of Egypt. The horizon, a soft gradient of pinks and oranges, promises another day beside the great Nile River. Life begins early here. People start from their homes, simple mud-brick dwellings, where families sleep on woven mats. The sound of water from the Nile gently lapping against the shore, carrying the promise of the day's work. For most Egyptians, daily life revolves round the river. It's not just a source of water. It's the lifeblood of the entire civilization. The Nile has nurtured the land for centuries. It's shaping the rhythms of the seasons and guiding the flow of life every year. The river floods its banks, leaving behind rich silt that turns the soil into fertile ground. This natural cycle governs the Egyptians, farming and their entire existence. The fields are worked by farmers, and much of the work is done by hand, using simple tools like hoes and plows. The daily chores may seem humble, but they're vital. The Egyptians rely on the harvests of wheat and barley, which are ground into flour for bread. Bread is their staple food, the foundation of every meal. In fact, much of their economy is based on grain. You can imagine the farmers wearing light linen tunics to protect them from the desert sun, laboring from sunrise to sunset. The sweat that falls from their brows is both a burden and a blessing, for it ensures the growth of the crops that will feed the entire country. But life is not all about labor. Egyptian society is structured, and the pharaoh, seen as a god on earth, reigns over the people with divine authority. The pharaoh's role is not just political, but deeply spiritual. He is the intermediary between the gods and the people, responsible for maintaining my heart, the principle of order, balance, and justice. Every decision, from building monuments to organizing harvests, must be done in accordance with Mat. To live out of harmony with this divine order is to risk chaos. Beyond the fields, there are many who serve in the temples, priests and priestesses who carry out the sacred rituals that connect Egypt to its gods. It's said that every Egyptian knew their role in life, whether it was a farmer, a craftsman, a merchant, or a priest. The Egyptian home is modest, but it's a place of family and community. Women are often responsible for managing the household and raising children, while men work the land, craft tools, or engage in trade. The family structure is tight-knit, and even in a bustling city like Thebes or Memphis, there's a deep sense of connection to those who live with children eager to learn. The ways of the world are raised with an understanding of the gods and the cosmos. Even in the midst of daily chores, there is an underlying awareness of the spiritual world. Children may learn the stories of Osiris and Us, of Horus, and Ra, stories that explain the cycles of the sun, the stars, and the afterlife. But their world is not just about survival. It's about meaning. Every moment is intertwined with belief. The Egyptians don't just work. They live with purpose. They live for the gods, for their families, and for the cycle of life and death. This sacred connection with their surroundings is reflected in the way they care for their homes, the way they create art, and even the way they eat. Every meal is an offering. Every chore is a prayer. It is a world where the divine is present in the mundane, where even the simplest acts can be seen as a way to honor the gods. There is also leisure in their lives. Music and dance are important parts of Egyptian culture, often performed at religious festivals or in the court of the pharaoh. The sounds of flutes, harps, and drums fill the air during these moments, creating an atmosphere of celebration and connection to the divine. In the evenings, as the sun dips behind the mountains, the people gather in small communities. Some may share a meal of bread, fish, and vegetables, while others listen to storytellers recount tales of the gods or the great deeds of pharaohs. At the end of each day, as the sun sets over the horizon and the stars begin to twinkle in the night sky, the Egyptians rest, but even sleep is sacred. The gods to rest, and in their dreams, the Egyptians believe they may receive messages. They may dream of the gods or ancestors, perhaps even receiving guidance for the next day. The spiritual world never truly disappears. It lingers in the air, in the water, in the earth, and in the hearts of those who walk the land. The bustling life along the Nile, the steady rhythm of work and rest is as much a part of Egypt as the pyramids and the temples. And for the Egyptians, this cycle is not just about survival. It's about creating harmony with the world, with the gods, and with each other. As the day winds down in ancient Egypt and the golden horizon fades into deep indigo, something begins to stir in the minds of its people. Something older than the pyramids, quieter than the desert winds. The Egyptians do not see the world as purely physical to them. Every tree, every breathes, every flame carries within it a force. I saw they called it the core, the vital essence. It flows through all living things. And then there's the bar, the personal lady. The uniqueness of the soul that could travel between the worlds, even in death. These parts of the spirit never truly disappear. Death wasn't feared, not in the way we might imagine. That it was respected, prepared for, and deeply integrated into life itself. To the Egyptians, the soul didn't just vanish. It had somewhere to go. The afterlife was not an abstract idea. It was an entire realm with rules, geography, and divine gatekeepers. The journey through the underworld, Duout, was as real as walking through the streets of Thebes. There were maps for it, texts for it, spells for it. The Book of the Dead wasn't poetry. It was survival gear for the soul. They believed that once the body died, the soul traveled through to what? A place of trials and monsters? Yes, but also of truth there. The heart would be weighed against a feather. If your heart was heavy with wrongdoing, it would be devoured by a demon. If light, you would pass into paradise, the field of reeds where life was beautiful, endless and in perfect harmony. And it was not only priests or pharaohs who dreamed of reaching this place. Common people, farmers and craftsmen, also commissioned spells, charms, and even coffins with carefully inscribed instructions. The gods didn't only belong to royalty. They were part of everyone's daily reality. But there's something more curious, more subtle about their worldview. Something almost psychedelic. Egyptians spoke of visions, dreams, and transformations in temple rituals. Certain herbs and incenses were burned not just for smell or ceremony, but to alter the state of mind. Some researchers today suggest that these substances may have induced altered consciousness. Blue lotus, for example, depicted in art again and again, was often brewed into pure wine. It's known now to have psychoactive properties. It was thought to open the mind, to bring one closer to the divine. There are suggestions, though still debated, that the priests may have had access to stronger visionary compounds, substances that could induce powerful spiritual experiences similar to what we might associate with dimethyltryptamine in modern world. Now, pause here a moment. Imagine being inside a dark stone temple. The air thick with incense, the sound of rhythmic chanting echoing through the hall, priests moving in slow ritual, and you lying on a cool slab of stone, drinking a brew meant to dissolve the boundaries between this world and the next. You might see the gods, you might become one. The ego slips away, replaced by images of Vulcan-headed deities, of rivers flowing through stars of your soul, traveling through duat, not in death, but in vision. Why would a civilization build to such complex spiritual systems? Why did they spend lifetimes preparing for the afterlife? Why did they believe that you could see gods become light travel as a soul? The answers may lie not just in faith, but in experience. These weren't just stories to them. For many Egyptians, spiritual practice wasn't a matter of belief. It was lived. It was felt. There are temple carvings and wall illustrations showing figures standing in strange poses, eyes wide, surrounded by symbols that today look uncannily similar to descriptions from modern day. Psychedelic journeys. Serpents winding through stars, disembodied eyes, endless corridors in the soul rising into beams of light. It's worth asking, were the ancient Egyptians explorers of consciousness? Did they intentionally seek altered states to contact the divine or to prepare for the great voyage after death? Some modern historians think they may have understood something. We are only beginning to rediscover that certain states of consciousness can change the way we perceive reality. But within those states we might glimpse something ancient, something vast, something that feels eternal. Of course, the mainstream academic world is cautious. It's difficult to prove intent from stone carvings, but the clues are there, layered beneath centuries of sand and symbol, and they pointed toward a civilization that didn't. Separate the physical from the spiritual, the waking from the dreaming, the living from the dead. To live in ancient Egypt was to live in a world charged with meaning. Spirits weren't somewhere else. They were right here in the wind that rustles the reeds, in the waters of the Nile, in the statues that gaze without eyes, in the dreams that came silently at night. They weren't afraid of these mysteries. They embraced them. They studied them. And in their own way, they recorded them, not with chapters or textbooks, but in stone and story, in sense and silence. And maybe, just maybe, envisioned as guided by sacred plants, whispered chants, and the trembling edges of altered perception in the heart of the then there. A temple complex etched onto a stone relief, hidden deep within subterranean chambers, lies a carving that continues to baffle archaeologists and ignite the imaginations of theorists. It's known as the Tendrelite. At first glance, It appears strange elongated bulb shapes, thick wires, a lotus flower base, and a snake emerging from the bulb itself. Nearby, figures stand holding or interacting with the device. To some, it looks like a symbolic representation, perhaps of fertility or energy from creation myths. But to others, it resembles something oddly modern, a form of ancient electric light. Could the Egyptians have had access to electricity? Mainstream scholars would argue, no. There's no hard evidence of power infrastructure. No wires, no batteries. No copper grids snaking through the sand. And yet the mystery lingers. Let's look closer inside. Many tombs sealed for thousands of years. The artwork remains pristine, the colors bright, the walls undamaged. But here's the strange part. There's no soot, no blackened ceilings, no residue from burning oil or torches, which would have been the only way to light these pitch-black spaces if they were working purely with fire. So how did they see? Some theories suggest polished mirrors were used to reflect sunlight deep into the chambers. Ingenious, yes, but not particularly effective. Experiments show that light quickly loses intensity after a few reflections. Which brings us back to that peculiar carving. Then their light and the murmurs of lost technology. Now let's shift even further, because the idea of ancient electricity isn't the only theory whispered about Egypt. There is another one that pushes the limits of belief and wraps its tendrils round the oldest and most iconic of Egyptian monuments. The Great Pyramid of Giza. To tourists, it's a marvel of stone and symmetry. To archaeologists, it's a tomb, or at least it was meant to be one. But for centuries, others have speculated that it was something else entirely, a machine. Let that word settle. There are claims fringe. Yes, but persistent, that the pyramid wasn't merely a tomb, but a power generator. That its internal chambers, shafts and materials like granite and limestone were chosen for conductive and insulating properties, forming a kind of ancient energy device. Some versions of the theory even suggest that water beneath the pyramid channeled from the Nile could have created a form of resonance energy. Is it true? There's no conclusive proof. But here's the thing about Egypt. The deeper you look, the more unanswered questions you find. Now let's appear up far above the pyramids into the endless night sky that the Egyptians themselves studied so carefully. They charted the stars. They aligned their temples with cosmic precision. They believed the gods came from the sky, descended in celestial boats. What if some ask those boats weren't a metaphor? This is where ancient Egypt collides with UFO lore. Not just modern sightings, but ancient contact. Some theorists pointed to the Toli Papyrus, a disputed but intriguing document that allegedly records a pharaoh witnessing 5 discs in the sky. The original is lost, only referenced in notes, but the tale persists. Fiery circles that fill the heavens and then vanished into the stars. To believers, this isn't just symbolic language. It's a recorded encounter. Even the gods themselves, beings like those who brought knowledge or who rode a solar boat through the sky, can be interpreted through a different lens. Are they deities born from myth or ancient beings described using the only language the people had at the time? Could it be that the gods who came from the sky were visitors, and the temples were more than just sacred space? They were landing sites, communication centers, or archives of knowledge. Beyond what we've yet decoded, these ideas are speculative. Yes. And they walk the line between curiosity and fantasy. But there's something undeniable human about the need to fill in the silence, to look at the grandeur of the pyramids, the mysteries carved into stone, and ask, is this all there was? Or is there something we've forgotten? Something the sands have tried to keep buried, but not quite erased. But perhaps the most curious connection of all is the one between the ancient world and the stars above. To the Egyptians, the sky wasn't empty. It was alive, full of meaning, messages, and possibly visitors. Orion was more than a cluster of stars. It was Osiris, lord of the dead. Sirius wasn't just bright, it was Isis, the divine mother. These weren't abstract ideas. They were gods who lived in the heavens and were thought to return from them. Their movements shaped rituals, architecture, and even beliefs about the afterlife. Look closely at the great pyramids there. Layout mirrors Orion's belt. It's not perfect, but it's close enough to raise eyebrows. Especially when you consider that similar celestial alignments appear in Mesoamerican and Chinese pyramid structures separated by oceans and thousands of years. Is it all coincidence? Some don't think so, but modern readers can't help but hear echoes of UFO sightings, bright orbs, silent motion, sudden disappearance, and it's not the only story like this. Similar tales appear in Babylonian records, in medieval paintings, and even in ancient Hindu texts. Some theorists believe the gods of old with their strange heads. Glowing symbols and sky chariots might not have been gods at all, but something else entirely not supernatural, but extraterrestrial. Then there's the tack. The pyramids are lined with astounding precision. The stone blocks fit so tightly you can't slide a blade between them, and inside some tombs, no soot or burn marks, yet deep corridors were lit. Some say mirrors were used. Others whisper about lost energy sources like the so-called Tenrolite, a carving that looks unsettlingly like a modern bulb. And that molecule we mentioned earlier, the method trip to mean some modern users describe encounters during their visions with entities that feel more real than real beings made of light. Geometry or sound. Some say they communicate. Some say they teach. Are these ancient myths psychological artifacts, or could they be memories, echoes of contact, or portals to something we once knew and then forgot? No hard answers, but the patterns keep surfacing. If those stories of sky visitors feel speculative, what follows feels even stranger because it's not based on myths or scrolls. It's based on stone. Massive stone, tons of it quarried, transported and stacked with a precision that still defies explanation. Let's start with the basics. The Great Pyramid of Giza is aligned almost perfectly to true north. It's less than 3/60th of a degree off. That kind of precision would be hard to achieve with modern tools, and we still don't know for sure how the Egyptians did it. Each limestone block weighs between 2 to 15 tons. The granite used in the king's chamber over 70 tons, brought from a swan 500 miles away. No pulleys, no cranes, no wheels, not even iron tools that we know of. So how theories ranged from ingenious sand ramps, copper chisels, and teams of thousands to the wildly speculative lost vibration-based tools, resonant frequency lifting, or even sound waves used to move stone. Sounds impossible. Maybe. But in Egyptian temples like Karnak, There are bas reliefs that seem to show tuning forks and strange instruments. The ancient Egyptians did study acoustics. Certain chambers in the pyramids echo in curious ways. Could they have used sound to aid construction? Or for something else entirely? Then there's the infamous Baghdad battery. Not Egyptian, but often brought up in the same breath a clay jar with a copper cylinder and iron rod. Add an acidic liquid and you get a small electrocharge. It's not proof of power grids, but it opens the door. And that door leads to the den. There's a temple on the walls. There's a carving that keeps researchers arguing. It shows what looks like a bulb complete with a filament-like snake inside attached to what resembles a power cable. Mainstream Egyptologists say it's a stylized lotus flower. Others insist it's a lost technology. But here's the catch. The temple is underground, and again, no soot, no torches. The walls are smooth. The carvings crisp. Some believe mirrors were used to reflect the sunlight. But try that in your hallway and see how far the light really travels. It's not that we know the Egyptians had electricity. It's that too much is still unexplained. And in the silence between what we know and what we only think we know, theories bloom in that space. Ancient Egypt becomes less of a civilization and more of a message. One carved in stone waiting to be read by those willing to ask questions as we shift our focus from the heavens. Before we plunge further into the mysterious depths of lost records and ancient prophecies, let's pause for a moment and turn our attention to something more earthly, yet no less fascinating. Because even in a land of towering monuments and cryptic hieroglyphs, daily life persisted, filled with tastes, smells, and traditions that still echo across millennia. The ancient Egyptians lived not only by the stars and stone, but by the rhythm of the Nile, and the nourishment it provided. Bread was their lifeblood, made from emmer wheat and barley. It was coarse and hearty, often ground with sand or grit, leaving telltale marks on the teeth of mummies. Yet for the people of that time, this gritty bread was sacred, a symbol of sustenance and community. Beer flowed just as freely, thick, fermented, and slightly sour. It was consumed by peasants and pharaohs alike. Brewed from the same grains as their bread, it was less a leisure drink, more a vital part of survival. Fruits like dates, figs, and pomegranates added sweetness to the diet, while garlic and onions were beloved for both flavor and medicinal value. Meat was rare for the poor but frequent for the elite. Duck, goose, and even fish from the Nile graced the tables of the privileged. For spices, they turned to coriander, cumin, and salt from nearby deserts, and then there was honey, the gift of the gods, used in offerings, medicine, and the occasional sweet treat. Honey was both a delicacy and a divine ingredient. Another intriguing idea is the possibility that the Egyptians may have used crystals or other natural materials to create energy fields. The properties of quartz and other minerals have been recognized in various cultures for their ability to focus or amplify energy. Could the Egyptians have harnessed this power to create an energy grid, allowing them to move large stones with minimal physical effort? But there's more. What if the Egyptians had access to something like electrical energy? Some have pointed to objects like the Baghdad battery and the Tenderlight artifacts that hint at the use of electrical principles in the ancient world. But then, their light in particular shows a striking resemblance to a modern light bulb, leading some to speculate that the Egyptians might have discovered a rudimentary form of electricity. This might have been used not only for lighting, but potentially for powering machinery or even aiding in the construction process. If the Egyptians had discovered some form of electricity, it could explain much about the precision with which the pyramids were built. The Great Pyramid stones are perfectly aligned, and its massive blocks were precisely cut and moved into place with incredible accuracy. Could electricity or some form of electromagnetic manipulation have played a role in achieving such precision? The alignment of the pyramids to the stars is another key element in this discussion. The Egyptians were deeply attuned to the movements of the stars and the sun, believing that the pharaohs ascended to the heavens upon death to join the gods. But what if the pyramids were not only aligned for spiritual reasons, but also to tap into cosmic energy acting as giant energy receivers? This connection between the Earth and the cosmos could have been a physical energy conduit designed to channel the power of the stars, the sun and the Earth itself into the structures they built. All of this points to a remarkable possibility that the ancient Egyptians understood energy in ways that modern scientists are still trying to fully grasp. It's not just a matter of tools or labor. It is a matter of understanding the natural forces that shape our world and using them to create extraordinary things. In the end, the pyramids may not just be monuments to the dead, but machines designed to tap into the power of the earth and the heavens. Their precise construction and their celestial alignments and their seemingly mystical qualities all suggest that the Egyptians knew something about the nature of energy that we have yet to fully uncover. What if these ancient energy technologies were not lost but simply waiting to be rediscovered? If energy made the impossible possible, then intelligence made it inevitable. Let us set aside talk of sound waves and cosmic rays for a moment and instead look at what is right in front of us. The sheer mathematical precision of ancient Egyptian structures. These weren't rough sketches drawn in the sand. These were architectural masterworks executed with knowledge that still challenges modern engineers. The Great Pyramid of Giza, for example, isn't just a heap of stones. It's built with an error margin of less than a single degree in alignment with true north. Its base is nearly a perfect square. Its placement on the Earth's surface aligned almost precisely with the geographic center of all the landmasses on Earth. Coincidence, or was there a mind or minds at work who understood geometry, astronomy and physics far beyond what we credit to ancient civilizations? Some researchers believe the pyramid wasn't designed solely as a tomb, but rather as a multifunctional structure, possibly even a kind of machine. Its internal shafts, chambers, and acoustic properties suggest that the structure was designed with specific energetic and spatial functions in mind. The materials used: limestone casing, stones, granite blocks, and the mysterious missing capstone may have played roles beyond aesthetic or symbolic value. And here's something even more mind-bending. The dimensions of the pyramid encode values that correlate with the speed of light, the radius of the Earth, and pi. Did the Egyptians somehow discover these values on their own? Or were they passed down perhaps from a lost civilization or even an off-world source? There is also the question of the tools. No iron chisels have been found that match the durability required to cut and shape the granite used in the king's chamber. What we do have are copper tools to explain the fine precision seen in many temple columns and reliefs, Some speculate that the builders used ultrasonic drilling, abrasive compound to techniques or tools that have simply been lost to time. And then there's the scale, the logistics of cutting, transporting and stacking millions of multi-ton blocks without cranes, diesel engines or computer modeling boggles the imagination. How are these blocks hauled across deserts and placed with such uniformity and symmetry? Grand theories abound, but they don't explain everything. Not even close. Some propose that the pyramid wasn't built piece by piece, but rather poured using a type of geopolymer concrete. This would explain the tight seams and odd internal inconsistencies. But if so, who invented this concrete formula over for 1,000 years ago? And why did it vanish? Even the internal acoustics of the pyramids and temples are so finely tuned that they resonate at specific frequencies. Was this by chance? Or did the architects intend for a sound to move a certain way through stone? Could this have been a tool for ritual healing or even communication? All of this leads to one conclusion, that it's difficult to ignore the builders of ancient Egypt weren't simply laborers following orders. They were engineers, scientists, and visionaries, working with knowledge that either came from a deeply ancient source or from someone else entirely, and that is the mystery where the Egyptians, inheriting a legacy from a pre-written civilization lost to time. Perhaps the fabled Zapotec be the first time. Or were they being instructed by something not quite human? The evidence isn't just in the grandeur of the monuments. It's in the silence between the stones, the codes written into dimensions, and the lingering feeling that someone knew exactly what they were doing in Egyptian mythology. There is a phrase rarely spoken in modern classrooms, but its presence echoes across their temples and texts, like a faded drumbeat from the edge of time. Zep Tepi. It translates to the first time, but it means far more than the beginning of a calendar or dynasty. Zep Tepi refers to an ancient golden age, a time before the pharaohs, before the known kings, before even Egypt itself was born as a civilization. A time when the gods walked the earth, ruled the land, and shared their knowledge with early humans. To the Egyptians, this wasn't metaphor. Zep Tepi was history, just older than we usually allow history to go. According to texts found in places like the Temple of Edfu, this Zep Tepi was the time when Osiris, his foes, and Ra were not just celestial symbols or spiritual guides. They were rulers, engineers, and architects. The myths describe great battles, cataclysms, and ultimately the decline of this golden age. The gods eventually departed, leaving humanity behind to rebuild with the fragments of their forgotten wisdom. Many dismiss Zapotec B as pure myth. But what happens when we stop treating ancient myths like fairy tales, and instead treat them like fractured memory? There's a pattern here, not just in Egypt, but around the world. Myths from other ancient cultures speak of a time before time. The Sumerians wrote of the Anunnaki, godlike beings who descended from the heavens. The Hindus described the Satyuga, the first and purest age of humanity. The Greeks spoke of a golden age ruled by titans, and Plato wrote of Atlantis, a lost civilization destroyed by a great flood whose knowledge may have seeded Egypt itself. Zep Tepi fits right into this global pattern in the Egyptian context. Zep Tepi may explain how the earliest dynasties rose so quickly. Egypt didn't begin as a primitive society that gradually developed monumental architecture. It seems to appear almost fully formed, with writing systems, astronomical knowledge, architectural blueprints, and religious structures already in place. That's not evolution, That's inheritance. But inherited from whom? Some believe Zeepi Tepi refers to a pre-dynastic, advanced civilization, perhaps one that existed before the last ice age. The melting of the glaciers around 12,000 years ago triggered massive sea level rise, wiping out coastal settlements from the world. What if some of those lost cities were repositories of ancient knowledge? What if survivors of that cataclysm, engineers, astronomers, and priests, traveled inland and passed their wisdom to emerging cultures? It's a compelling idea. One echoed by the way Egyptian monuments encode knowledge in their architecture. The Great Pyramid, for instance, may contain not just symbolic value, but mathematical constants, planetary distances, and timelines of global events. Could this be a form of historical preservation, an echo of Zeptebi hidden in plain sight? And then there's the astronomical angle. Ancient Egypt wasn't just oriented to the stars, it revolved round them. Temples were aligned to solstices and star risings. The Sphinx, weathered in ways that suggest exposure to millennia of rain, may predate dynastic Egypt entirely, possibly pointing to a time closer to 10,000 BCE. So is Zeepi Tepi real? We may never know for sure, but here's what makes it hard to dismiss. Its consistency across cultures, its alignment with unexplained evidence, and the sheer audacity of the idea itself. That before the rise of what we call history, there was another age, one of light, order, knowledge, and catastrophe. And if that's true, then Egypt isn't the beginning, it's the reminder. If Zeptepi gave Egyptians a mythic memory of a perfect past, then the Book of the Dead gave them a roadmap for the uncertain future, a step-by-step survival guide for the soul. The name Book of the Dead is modern. The ancient Egyptians simply called it the Book of Coming Forth by Day. It wasn't a single book at first, but a collection of spells, prayers, passwords, and instructions meant to help the deceased navigate the afterlife. But this wasn't just religious fluff or ceremonial poetry. This was practical magic, at least to them, written on papyrus and painted on tomb walls. These texts were designed like an ancient RPG strategy guide, full of hidden bosses, traps, mazes, and riddles the soul had to overcome to reach eternal peace. And they were serious about it. In the Egyptian view, death wasn't the end. It was a trial, a layered realm where the dead had to pass through gates guarded by monsters, sail across underworld rivers, and ultimately stand before Osiris for a final judgment. There, the soul's heart would be placed on a scale and weighed against the feather mat, the goddess of truth, balance, and justice. If your heart was too heavy with sin, deceit, or guilt, it would be devoured by a mit, a fearsome creature with the head of a crocodile, the body of a lion, and the hind legs of a hippo. Game over. But if your heart balanced, if you lived with honor and followed the cosmic order, you would be granted immortality, rebirth, and reunion with the gods. That's why the Book of the Dead existed, to help you cheat death, not by avoiding it, but by mastering it. Now, here's where it gets even stranger. Some scholars have pointed out that many of the challenges described in these texts mirror altered states of consciousness, descriptions of floating, transformations, tunnels of light, disembodied awareness. They sound eerily similar to modern-day near-death experiences, psychedelic visions, or deep meditative states in that sense. The Book of the Dead isn't just about literal death. It may also be a manual for accessing altered realities, for loosening the soul from the body while still alive, perhaps to explore other realms, communicate with gods, or prepare for what's next. And the art that accompanies these texts is filled with symbolism that almost seems coded. Eisen. Impossible positions, serpents coiling through dimensions, boats sailing across the stars. Could this be a reflection of how they saw consciousness? Or even a visual language for describing things that words couldn't reach? Here's something else to chew on. In some tombs, versions of the Book of the Dead are customized for the individual. It wasn't one size fits all. People would choose which spells they thought they needed most. Some wealthy Egyptians even had their own versions commissioned, meaning they were gaming the afterlife. And in a way, it's hauntingly beautiful. A civilization that spent its entire cultural life preparing for death, not as a tragic end, but as an adventure, an initiation, a test of the soul's worth and wisdom. So, when we look at these ancient texts, with their spells and strange creatures, maybe we shouldn't laugh or dismiss them as fantasy. Maybe we should ask ourselves, what did they know that we've forgotten? What if the Book of the Dead wasn't just a guide for what happens after you die, but also a map of the mind? The ancient Egyptians weren't just ritualists. They were observers of inner landscapes. And in many of their most sacred texts, artwork, and mythology, there's a recurring pattern. Serpents, eyes, spirals, cosmic rivers, dismembered gods, and rebirth through tunnels of darkness. These aren't just metaphors for physical death. They could easily be descriptions of psychedelic experiences, altered states of awareness, or deep spiritual trances. Let's talk about the serpent in Egyptian art. Serpents are everywhere, sometimes terrifying, sometimes sacred. They're Asapep, the great chaos snake who must be defeated nightly by Ra as he travels through the underworld. And then there's Man, a protective serpent that coils round Ra's soul abode to guard him during his journey through darkness. But serpents also represent something more intimate, transformation. Shedding skin, rebirth. The coiling shape of Kundalini energy, said in other cultures to rest at the base of the spine, waiting to rise. And then there's the pineal gland, located deep in the center of the brain. It is shaped like a tiny pine cone and often associated in spiritual traditions with the third eye, a gateway to perception beyond the physical. Some researchers speculate that this gland may naturally produce dimethyltryptamine, one of the most powerful hallucinogens known to science. Why does that matter? Because many ancient depictions, especially in Egyptian art, feature strange symbolism around the forehead. Eerie of the rearing cobra worn on the crowns of pharaohs sits right at that same spot. Was this just status, or was it a signaling awakened division? And if you've ever seen the cross-section of a human brain compared to the Eye of Horus, the resemblance is uncanny. It raises a strange possibility. Did the Egyptians have knowledge of the brain, its structure, or its role in spiritual experience, that we've only recently rediscovered? Let's go one layer deeper. Some rituals in the Egyptian mystery schools, particularly those held deep within temple complexes, may have involved sensory deprivation, rhythmic sound, and anthropogenic herbs. Not recreational drug use, but ceremonial, engineered to induce visions of the underworld and allow initiates to practice, dying before death. And when they came back, they weren't the same. They'd seen the underworld, spoken with gods, faced their shadow, and returned reborn. This isn't just ancient Egypt's story. It echoes through the elusiveness and mysteries in Greece, shamanic rites in the Amazon, and Tibetan death meditations. Different cultures, same core idea: you can die before you die and come back wiser. So, when you see Egyptian walls covered in coiling serpents, glowing eyes, floating boats, and star-speckled sky goddesses, maybe it's not just religion. Maybe it's a language for what happens inside the mind. When the veil lifts, the ego dissolves, and you glimpse a reality stranger than myth. Just when it seemed the desert had given up all its secrets, new whispers emerged from beneath the sand. In early 2025, a joint team of Italian and Scottish researchers led by Professor Crudomelling of the University of Pisa used advanced synthetic aperture radar as air imaging to scan deep below the Giza Plateau. Their analysis uncovered what appears to be an immense underground complex hidden beneath the Pyramid of Khafre, the second tallest of the iconic trio according to the preliminary radar scans. The site features 8 colossal vertical shafts, each plunging over 2,100 feet into the earth. Surrounding these shafts are spiral pathways, almost like the threads of a screw descending into the bedrock deeper still. The data suggests the presence of 2 vast cube-like chambers, each nearly 80 meters wide, and a network of 5-layered multi-tiered structures linked by what appear to be corridors or passageways. The implications are staggering. Some theorists believe this could be physical evidence, pointing toward the long room at Hall of Records, a mythical library said to contain the forgotten knowledge of a dynastic civilization, or even remnants of Atlantis itself, first popularized by Edgar Cayce, the so-called sleeping prophet, in the early 20th century. The Hall of Records has been described as a hidden archive buried near the Sphinx, or beneath the Giza pyramids. It's said to house records of human origins, lost technologies, and cosmic truths. Information so powerful that access to it was deliberately sealed away until humanity reached a higher state of consciousness. While mainstream Egyptologists remain skeptical of both the Hall and these recent claims, the radar findings have reignited debate. Is this merely geological anomaly, or the first real glimpse into a buried legacy left behind by an intelligence far older than we imagined? The quest for understanding Egypt's ancient mysteries reveals a deeper truth. The more we uncover, the more questions we are left with. Every stone, every symbol, and every artifact tells a story, but also leaves behind a trail of mysteries that beckon us forward from the rituals of daily life to the spiritual beliefs that shaped an entire civilization. We've only scratched the surface of what these ancient people knew. We've considered the possibilities of extraterrestrial influence, the myths surrounding UFOs, and the strange parallels that seem to tie the pyramids to advanced knowledge beyond their time. But beyond the surface of these enigmas lies something even more profound: the realization that the pursuit of knowledge is not merely about answering questions, it is about the journey itself. Each discovery, whether it be the puzzling alignment of the pyramids, the controversial Hall of Records, or the forgotten technologies hinted at in the shadows of history, only adds layers to a story that we may never fully comprehend. As we pause to reflect on these ancient wonders, we begin to realize that the true legacy of Egypt isn't just in its monumental structures or its hidden chambers. It's in the questions that continue to challenge us. What were they truly capable of? What did they know that we have yet to understand? How much of their wisdom was lost, and how much still lies buried beneath the sands waiting to be rediscovered? As we look to the past, the more we explore, the more we are reminded that we are not just uncovering the history of an ancient civilization, but discovering the very essence of our shared curiosity and our desire to understand the unknown.